Uh, so what I'll do is I'll just put up the certain slides on the screen and take you all through how a trust works, what are the things around it. Just give me a minute. It's visible, right?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so should we start?
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, private family trust, as the name suggests, is meant for family members. So it is a separate entity created in India. Okay, and it is as simple, if I can put it, as a bank account. Like how normally people have a bank account in India, which is in their name. Trust is also like a bank account only. The difference is that your bank account stands in your name, but trust has a separate name to it, separate PAN to it, and it's treated as a separate legal entity. So when we set up this trust in India, it is specifically created for certain objectives. So I'll take you through certain objectives. What are they? And then how it is made, how it is created, who are the parties, and what are the things around it. So the first and the most important objective, which is relevant to this crowd of people, is a level playing field for NRIs. Now, most all of you are either NRIs or having an overseas citizen, right? So now if you have money and you want to send it to India to invest, the main reason for you sending the money to India is to earn better returns, because Indian markets can give better returns. Now, there are different ways in which you can invest. One is that if you decide to invest in your own name, then you can do that. But what happens, or what challenges you will face as an NRI or an overseas citizen, is that India does not allow you to invest in all financial products. So therefore, you will have restricted investment options available. Now, so then that won't give you the better return that you are expecting. Also, the other challenge you will face, specifically where people are in US, Canada, or UK, certain countries, is that whatever, if you invest in your name, and whatever interest or whatever income that is generated in India, you pay taxes over here, plus the differential you pay in the country of your resident, which is US, UK, US, and Canada. So that way, if you invest in your own name, it is not beneficial. So the other way to route is generally through a resident Indian person or a resident Indian entity like a trust. So generally where people have parents or siblings, they may want to invest in their individual name rather than going through the trust route. But the challenge again that they face is that the investments will be available or will be invested through this resident Indian person only till the lifetime of that person. What happens after that? Then you will have to again think of another way to continue the investments. So the better and the recommended way would be to have a trust set up in India, because trust is an entity created in India. It is managed in India. So therefore, it's treated as a resident Indian entity, and therefore it can invest in all financial products. So ultimately, then your objective of earning better returns is met if it is through a trust. So therefore, this objective is the main objective for all of y'all. I'll just continue in case if anybody has any questions, please do ask.
Yeah, is the family or the siblings, they have to be very close, is it?
So the parties to the trust have to be relatives, yes.
So relative means cousins cannot be included?
So in India, there is a definition under relatives. Cousins may not be included, but there is a long list of relatives which we can share with you all. So basically it has parents, it has siblings, in-laws, spouses, parents, lineal ascendants, lineal descendants. So those kind of people can be included in it.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the main important objective which we feel is relevant to all of y'all at this point. But there are other objectives also for which people in India create a trust. So I'll just quickly take you all through those objectives as well. Second is basically on the estate planning, which means succession planning. So after you, if you have assets, substantial assets in India, trust is also a vehicle to pass on that assets in a smooth manner. Because of course, what we tell clients is to have a will as well for the assets that they hold in their name. But trust is a much more systematic way, because trust is something that you are doing it in your lifetime. You are seeing how the money is going there, who are the beneficiaries, how is the continuity of the trust happening. Whereas a will is a document that you're making today. You're writing all your intentions, but the execution is happening when you are not there to clarify all that. So trust is done in a, succession planning through a trust is done in a much more systematic. So, for example, where people, have to more than one child, they may decide to have two separate trusts. So, in that, there is a clear segregation of succession planning done on day one, that you are clearly segregating the assets and saying that this will go to child one, this will go to child two. Or many a times, people, when kids get married, then, they could go through a separation or a divorce at, in some point in time. So if that happens, then what happens is, from the will, if the assets have already passed on to children, then it becomes their own wealth. So then at that point in time, the other side can claim those assets. But if it is there in the trust, then the money is in the trust, held in the trust is the owner of those assets, and your child is just a beneficiary. So the other side cannot claim those assets which you have left for your child in such a separation or anything that they are going through, because the money does not belong to the child, and the spouse of your child is not a beneficiary of the trust. So you can protect the wealth against such situations as well, right? Or where people have, sometimes where people have minor children. So in that scenario, if something happens to the parents at a very young age, people may inherit wealth. So that may not be a good age to inherit that wealth, because they don't know what to do with the money. So rather than that, if it is there in the trust and they receive the money when they attain a matured age, would be another way of succession planning. So that is what objective 2 serves. Moving on, objective number 3 is more from an point that if you have assets in India, right, in US, or in US, you have this inheritance tax, which is I think almost 40-45% of the wealth. So basically, it's a similar kind of a tax that will be levied in India. Currently, we do not have estate duty, but if it is likely to come in India. So what estate duty will do is basically whatever assets you have in India, and if a person is no more, whatever assets he leaves behind, on that a certain percentage of tax the Indian government will take away as estate duty, and then remaining money will flow to your family members. So if that situation happens, then a large part of your wealth goes to the government as a tax. Now, again, as you know, that in US, there is also a threshold limit of $11.7 million. But India will not have that high kind of a exemption limit. So there will be certain limits, exemption limits, but it won't be that much. And the tax rate, what we are seeing in other countries, is in the range of 30 to 40%. So whatever assets you have in India, on that, even if 30% is taken away as tax, it is a huge amount. So how does trust help in, skipping a level from one generation to another and saving that tax? Is that people today create a trust, they park a portion of their wealth in the trust, and whatever goes in the trust today, because the act is not in place, so that money can pass on to your family members whenever the trust ends. And trust is not an individual. So therefore, estate duty or inheritance tax will not likely be on this trust. It will be only on the individual's wealth. So that is how you can safeguard on this estate duty. So that is another objective. And the last objective, which may be a very rare, rarely applicable to y'all, because it mainly talks about ring fencing the assets of the person from any personal liabilities or encumbrance that they may face having business or having a profession in India, which I think most of y'all may not have that. So if a person is in business or has a profession in India, then if at all some liability or some fraud happens in the company, then the business assets, of course, will be first considered to pay up the liability. But at times, if liability is large, then it encroaches upon the personal wealth of the people responsible behind it. So in that scenario, the individual or the person in whose name the business is, will be all his personal assets, whether financial or properties, can get attached. So in that scenario, if he has set up a trust in India, in when days are good, and a portion of his wealth is again parked in the trust, then he and his family can fall back on the trust money to live and maintain the same lifestyle that they are living today. But of course, this, if you're creating this trust for this particular objective, then one thing needs to be kept in mind is that this entity should not be created when there is already some liability, or a liability that's going to come up. Because if the malified intent is clearly shown, then the money in the trust is not protected. So this is to safeguard against any business risk or professional risk that a person may have. So these are the 4 objectives for which generally people create a trust. Any questions so far?
Yeah, Sona, but no, this is really good. You have laid out the objectives very nicely.
Yes.
So a couple of questions, right? So you mentioned about NRIs and OCIs and so on, right? But like, there are people in India, they can create the same trust, right? So it doesn't have, yeah. So if you're an Indian citizen and, you want to protect your family and so on, you can create a trust.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, other question is, you mentioned that the trust will have its own PAN number, right?
Yes, sir.
So how about Aadhaar? So because most of the accounts, they want to link PAN and Aadhaar, right? So how will you satisfy that requirement?
Trust is an entity, sir, so it will not have an Aadhaar. So only PAN is a requirement, and filing tax returns of the trust is the requirement. And it will have a bank account and a demat account. That's all.
So it will have a PAN number.
Yes.
And how is that related to the individual's PAN number? Like, say, for income tax purposes, right? So if your trust, for example, says if it has an interest of 10 lakh rupees or something per year, then what happens to the income tax?
Yes, sir. So income tax, we'll see in the coming slides also, that the trust because it's a separate entity, it pays taxes at its entity level. So whatever income the trust earns, the trust will pay taxes at its entity level. So individual doesn't have to pay.
Okay, so you got some slide on that. Okay. And the last question from my side is, you mentioned about introduction of estate duty in India.
Yes.
What are the chances of that? Is that already in play, or what is the timeline for that?
No, so it is currently not in India, but it is likely to come up. And the reason why this point has been brought by the government is because in 2015, the Indian government had abolished wealth tax. So we had wealth tax till 2015, and they have abolished that. And since then, they are trying to get this estate duty in place in order to generate revenue. So I don't have a timeline in the sense that when are they going to introduce it. It may, we were expecting it to come long back after the act got abolished, but so far it has not come in picture. But it is likely to come maybe in the next 5 years, or maybe even lesser, or even 10 years. We don't know, sir. But it is likely to come up. Also,
so
sir,
just the one thing actually on that, a question on that, since the trust beneficiary has to be an Indian citizen, right?
No, sir, not really. I'll explain the structure in the next slide as to who can this be.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's what. Okay, so I think we'll talk about this one then.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Just on the estate duty part, for everybody's information, that this estate duty, in India, we had it in 1953. Then by 85, this act got abolished. And thereafter, they had introduced this wealth tax, which again got abolished in 2015. So they are trying to reintroduce this estate duty now. So that is just additional information that I wanted to pass on. Any other question?
Just one thing, I'm sorry, actually, on that. So this is the question that I thought I forgot to ask earlier. So if we have to invest, for example, from here into a private company in India, like the seed investment or like the VC or the PE or like one of the alternate like investment vehicles. So that you think that could also be held in the trust then, right? That your like ownership stake?
Ownership only to the extent that you can hold the shares of that company. So basically what we generally, you can hold it, you can transfer the shareholding to the trust. But what we generally prefer is to keep the trust, separate, and the business activities or anything, any other risky activities separate. So you may have one trust where you want to just do investments in it, and one trust where you can, do all this other activities in the trust. So you can have multiple trusts. That's not a problem for multiple objectives.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Should I go ahead or any questions? Okay. So now after we've seen what are the objectives for creating the trust, let's understand who are the parties to the trust. So first is that there is a settlor who's the creator of the trust. And the settlor is the one who funds the trust. That money comes in the bank account of the trust. The money is to be used only for the beneficiaries of the trust. And to manage the trust, we need minimum 2 trustees, because private family trusts are governed by an Indian Trust Act. And that act says that you have to have minimum 2 trustees at all times. Now let's understand. So specifically, because you all are, US and Canada residents, what is important for y'all is that if you have to settle the trust in India, or y'all have to create a trust in India, you can do that, but there will be some tax implication for you back in the US. As far as India is concerned, Indian laws are concerned, there is no problem. But for y'all in the respective countries where y'all residing, there may be tax implications. So therefore, what we have done is that wherever there are US citizens in, as a client that we have, we always prefer them to to have a resident Indian to create a trust for them. So maybe parents or siblings, or as I mentioned about the relative definition, so somebody within that definition, whomever you are comfortable with. Because what happens is that the settlor is the one who contributes to the trust. So if you all are setting up a trust for your family, then you will have to gift the money to the settlor, and the settlor will have to put it in the trust, where the beneficiaries could be your family members. Now, one is that if you want to be a beneficiary, then you can be along with, so which means husband, wife, and children can be beneficiaries of the trust, and they can be all US citizens, or you can have a combination of Indian and US citizens, not a problem, US or any other country. So you can have overseas citizens as beneficiaries, or supposing, as far as the trustees are concerned. Now, trustees could be 2 people. One is the managing trustee, and second could be the confidant. So this managing trustee could be you, which means supposing if there is a husband, wife, and children kind of family, so the husband can choose to be a trustee and not be a beneficiary. So beneficiaries will be wife and children, so that if he is a trustee, he can have some decision-making authority. Okay, and second trustee could be the same resident trustee if you want. You can do that combination. Here it's just written in order to make you all understand the thing. But structure can be based on each family dynamics and each family requirements. Also, what we need to look into when we are deciding the structure is the implication what you may have in the respective country where you all are residing. So generally, when we deal with US or any other overseas country clients, we have a set of questions, if the client is interested and is wanting to go ahead with the trust. Before that, we give you a set of questions where there are, those questions pertain to whether the settlor, whether the trustee can be the US person, or if the beneficiaries are US persons, what are the implications? So like that, we give a set of few questions, which is recommended to you for you to check it with your tax person in US, because he is the one who's going to ultimately file the tax returns for you in US. So once we create it, and if there is an issue later on, then we don't want that situation to arise. So we clear all the doubts first only and then go ahead. So I'm just giving you a combination that one option is that the one person can become, the US person can become the trustee, and the wife and children can be beneficiaries, or you have both different trustees and you and your family can be the beneficiaries. So that combination can be decided based on each family dynamic. So that is the structure of the trust. Any questions?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions in this.
Yes, sir.
So the second trustee, confidant, can be a non-resident, right?
Can be a non-resident. Just one more clarification. If we are talking, if we are dealing with US, the overseas citizens, then you all need to have an OCI card to either be a trustee or a beneficiary.
So even NRIs and OCIs can be managing trustee if they have OCI card.
Yes, sir. Only thing, as I said, that once we check it with your tax person, because sometimes tax person says that don't be a trustee. Sometimes they say
right. Okay.
So let them decide that, and then we can take a call. But nothing, as far as India is concerned, it's completely okay.
And can the managing trustee be the settler?
Yes, can be, but then the settler is a resident Indian. So maybe sometimes, parents or siblings are resident Indian. So, if you're comfortable with that, it's completely okay. Because, see, ultimately, trustee's role is to run the trust. So, though technically, all the decision making will be done by you and your family, if these trustees are somebody else, some other family members, but on paper, they are the trustees. So if any, and since it's a trust is a bank account, so any check signing or anything, a resolution to be passed, it's to be done by the trustees. So you need to appoint these people with somebody whom you really trust.
Yeah, and I think that might be the reason why you may not prefer to put like yourself as a trustee, because if you have the signatory authority on that, then you have to declare the trust assets under your own US, like the IRS, for example, the FBAR. Yeah, exactly.
That's true, sir. So that's why we prefer checking with your tax person and then doing it. So whether they are beneficiaries or trustees, reporting requirements will be there as far as we understand US laws. So whenever you file tax returns, you have to declare that you are just a trustee or a beneficiary of the trust. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Just the one thing. So all the funds then have to be routed through the settler. So let's say if you want to have some kind of the continued like the investment, then every single time you have to do that, you have to first gift that to the settler, and then settler will have to pay that from the trust then, right?
Yes, correct. That's true. So
does it not kind of come under does it not get flagged as some kind of like the money laundering or something in a way?
No, sir. Because see, because whom you are giving is your family member. Right. So you are gifting it to your family member. That's one transaction. Now that family member creates a trust with your family members as beneficiaries. That's okay. That's completely fine. And just another thing is that whenever the settler or whatever money goes in the trust will only be used for the beneficiaries. It cannot be used for trustees, or the settler cannot take it back. So one more comfort level you will get if you are, having some other family member as a settler, is that whatever money they put, they cannot take it back because it's an irrevocable trust.
What happens if the settler is no more after creating the trust?
So the settler's role is to create the trust and fund the trust. So going forward, after the settler is no more, the funding of the trust may be stopped, or you will have to then route the money through some other family member who's a relative as per the definition that we have given. So so settler is just somebody who will fund the trust. The functioning of the trust has to be done by the trustees, and if there is any trustee is no more, then what we do is, when we set up the trust, is we prepare a trust deed. So trust deed is like a rule book where we define all the terms and conditions. And in that, there is a specific clause on how a new trustee is to be appointed, who appoints that. So all that is given under that paragraph.
Okay, thanks.
All right, sir. So one more important thing is that whatever money goes in the trust is to be used for the beneficiaries. Now, considering that these beneficiaries are US persons or any other overseas citizens, one thing is that whatever money the trust contributes to the beneficiaries, if they give it to the beneficiaries in their account, then it will come in their NRO account in India. Okay, so as far as India is concerned, there is no issue. They don't have to pay any taxes or anything. But in the country of where they are residing, we need to check that what is the implication they will have to face as far as this money is concerned. So that is something that also needs to be checked when we are sending that set of questions.
So let us say that you put some, like say 2 crores or something in the trust, and then it accumulates dividend and interest, it becomes 3 crores, right? And then that is withdrawn by the beneficiary, right? You are saying that the capital gain is not taxed for the beneficiaries in India, but it may be taxed in US?
So yes, sir. So one thing is that whatever the trust, so that 2 crores that is contributed is treated as a capital or a corpus to the trust. Now that 2 crores when invested in the trust generates income and becomes 3 crores. So that 3 crores, the income has already accrued in the trust. So trust at its entity level will pay taxes in India. Okay. After paying the taxes, whatever distributions are made to the beneficiaries, it is in India, it is not treated as income in their hands, but it is treated as distribution. So as far as India is concerned, there is no tax implication. But as far as US is concerned, and what we understand of US laws is that US divides this into 2 parts. So they say if you are receiving from the corpus component, the corpus which is the 2 crores, then there is no tax implication even in US. But if you are receiving any money from the income component, then there is a gray area. And why is it a gray area? Is because when we have dealt with US clients, we have got conflicting views. So some tax persons say the income that is received is taxable in US. Some say it is not taxable. So then we leave that decision to the tax person to decide that. So that's why, so that is the implication that it may have in US.
I mean, how would the US even know that this is what portion is the corpus versus not? Because I mean, since the money is flowing through a settler, which you're gifting, so the 2 crore you actually gifted to your dad, for example, in India, and they contributed to this trust, and now the 3 crore has to be like is essentially a gift. Is a beneficiary. You're getting a gift from the trust basically to like yourself back, basically, right?
Right.
So there's no direct chain of linkage between those two events.
Yeah, but I think you have to declare this trust in the FinCEN form.
Yes, sir. So as I said, when you are a beneficiary, you have to just specify that you are a beneficiary of a trust, and they will ask you, are you receiving any money? So when you are not receiving any money, there's no issue. No problem. So you can just say, no, nothing is received. Because
yeah, right. So you have to declare it every year when you submit your,
IRS.
The separate document, then you have to declare it. So
FinBar doesn't have any tax implication, though. That's purely the asset declaration, right?
FBAR, FinCEN FBAR, it does have tax implication because you can they can match it, they can match whatever assets you have against whatever you're declaring and see whether it makes sense, right? That is why they are collecting all that information, and I think there is a linkage also there. You have to put the line number or something in the IRS form. And what is the tax rate for the trust?
Yes, I'll come to that. It's there in the slide. So any further questions on this? Or should
I have a quick question. So the beneficiary, let's say they are, I mean, ultimately the end point is that it's in US dollars when the beneficiaries receive the money, right?
No, in India, it will be INR.
No, I understand. But then you're talking about beneficiaries who are US citizens.
Yes.
Let's say they want to use the money in US, then it has to still go through a 15AB certification.
Yes. So yes, correct.
That part is not avoided.
Yes, that is there. That is the limit so money will come to their NRO account in India, and then they can, using that limit, they can repatriate the money back. $1 million.
The repatriation part is the same as whatever process.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
I have one question. In the case of what Nari gave, 2 crores settler contributing, is settler would be liable for any taxes there? Settler would have his own income and his own tax given in here. This
Yeah.
additional 2 crores is what is impact for him?
No, sir.
her.
So basically, since the money is gifted between relatives, and the relative definition which we spoke about, so as per that definition, if the person, you and the settler are within that definition, then there is no tax implication even for the settler when he receives the money. Because in India, there is no gift tax between these relatives. So if you're giving to a non-family member, then of course, yes, there will be tax implication for that person. But as far as family members are there, no tax implication.
I mean, settler can also contribute their own assets, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, if your dad have like the
Yes.
like the account, then they want to pass it on, then they can also contribute their own funds.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They can. If that is done, then it's I mean, it's up to them. Like if they want to transfer it in their lifetime, so rather than giving it to you all, they can put it in the trust also. That's fine. Yeah.
So if the settler, say your parents or something, and they have like a house or something, they can put it in the trust?
Yes, they can put it, but having a property in a trust also has implications, which again, I'll explain you in the coming slides.
Okay.
Sir. Any other question? Okay, I'll move on. Then this is just specifically for US persons, though I've mentioned certain things to you all, but I'll just take you all through that since, there will be implications for US person to create a trust. So generally the parents create a trust in India for children who are US persons as beneficiaries. For this entity, US taxation is not applicable as it is not created in US, created by a US person. So as I was saying, that if a US person creates the trust, which means that if you all are the settlers, then whatever contributions are made, any gain on that will be taxable to you in the US. So therefore, we generally avoid US persons to be the settler, right? And so as the transaction, what I told you, that you will be gifting to the settler and the settler will be putting the money in the trust. So when you are gifting, your US limits will be used. So currently, in US, there are two kinds of limits. One is the annual limit and one is the lifetime exemption limit of 11.7. So if you are, I think the yearly limit is $15,000, if I'm not wrong. So you can gift from that money to the Indian settler and the settler will put it in the trust, right? And whenever the trust has to pay to the beneficiaries, as I said, it will come to their NRO account. And from NRO account, they can repatriate using the RBI limit of $1 million per financial year per individual, right? So that is basically the difference from the normal, if a resident Indian or any other NRI was creating a trust. This is the only difference, that if US or the other, or US, Canada or UK kind of countries, if they create a trust, then there could be some implications like this. So therefore, we prefer Indian persons for them to create the trust. So that is as far as this slide is concerned. Then the next important point is that what is the type of trust that is created for setting up this trust in India and for achieving the objectives which we discussed. So one is the irrevocable nature of the trust and the other is the discretionary nature of the trust. Irrevocable would mean that whenever you are gifting money to the settler and the settler is putting the money in the trust, that money cannot be taken back by him because he is giving it irrevocably. He is losing ownership of that money. Now the money no longer belongs to the settler, right? So that is the, so that will give you some comfort that the money is not going to be used by them. Because there is something known as a revocable trust also, where if you transfer money, if the settler transfers money, then that money can be again used by him or her. So therefore, we prefer having an irrevocable trust. Discretionary trust is basically that if the beneficiaries, say there are 3 beneficiaries, then every trust will have a duration defined. So you can keep the trust till your lifetime or 20 years, 25 years, depending on the on each family to family. So during the life of the trust is treated as a discretionary trust, which means that if one of you are the trustees, then you can have the full discretion or the control of the trust. You can decide where the investments are to be done, what happens to the assets in the trust, when does it go to which beneficiary. So there is no particular share defined for any of the beneficiaries in the trust. It is up to the trustee's discretion that you decide that in a particular year you want to just keep the money growing. Then you don't distribute any money to the beneficiaries. So, or in a particular year you need some money, say for kids' education, if they are, we are young couples, or if for the marriage of the children or any. So trust money can be used for any kind of expenses, from day-to-day expenses to any marriage, vacation, travel, anything. Right. So that discretion lies with the trustees to decide that. That's what irrevocable discretionary trust does. Now, I think asked about the. Sorry, any questions?
Yeah. So in the discretionary trust, can trustee then also change the beneficiary?
No.
As well?
No.
Okay.
That is not. Yeah. So beneficiaries are defined, so they cannot change the beneficiaries. Yeah. So
can the settlor keep contributing every year? It's got to be done one time.
No. Yes, sir. So it is ongoing process till the. So every trust, as I said, will have a duration. So till the duration of the trust, the settlor can keep contributing.
Okay.
Not a problem.
If the trust is not irrevocable, that means it's revocable, then the managing trustee can change the beneficiaries anytime.
Yeah, the settlor can change the beneficiaries if it is revocable, because the irrevocability is on the settlor, because he is the one who's creating the trust. So he has that authority to change it. Trustees are just like acting on behalf of the trust.
Okay. So you always recommend that we should go for irrevocable, so that it's very clear who are the beneficiaries.
Correct, sir. Right, sir. And then because see, settlor will be somebody else, some other family member. Of course, equations are good today, but we don't know. So let's be, sure and have a proper, the trust structure, so that there is no issue later on.
Okay, thanks.
At any point in time, if you have to change the beneficiary, you have to dissolve the trust and create a new one?
Yes, that would be the thing. Because if there are some minor modifications to be made to the trust, like changing the address of the trust or something, then you can do an amendment deed and do that. But for doing an amendment deed or any modification in the trust, as per the governing act, you need to take consent of the beneficiaries. Right. So in an irrevocable trust, changing beneficiaries and all that may not be the thing. So you will have to dissolve the trust and then maybe create a new one. Or you can have another trust also and continue with this trust with different set of beneficiaries.
Even the percentages will have to be defined in advance?
Yes. So basically what happens is that during the life of the trust, say you create the trust for 20 years. During the 20-year period, the trust is a discretionary trust. But the day the 20th year gets over and the trust has to wind up, in the trust deed that we prepared today, there is a specific clause which says that if the trust winds up after 20 years, if there are, say, wife and 2 children as beneficiaries, and the ratio that I want to give is 50-25-25, then that ratio is defined today in the trust deed, but applicability of this ratio is only when the trust winds up, not during the life of the trust. So there is a percentage that is defined, sir. Fine, sir?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Or?
So who can change the beneficiaries? Like say that like along the way something happens, and so who has that right to change the beneficiary?
So once you have defined the beneficiaries, they will continue the same way.
Okay, then you have to like dissolve the trust and form like a new trust. That's the only way.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. So just to give you an example how flexible the trust is, supposing say wife and 2 children are beneficiaries, okay, and say there is 5 crores in the trust. Now, for some reason, the father is not getting along with one of the child, okay, then what happens is that what you could do is out of that 5 crores, you could remove 4 crores or maybe more than that and give it to one of the beneficiaries using the discretionary power. So then ultimately, if you don't want to give, that 25% to that child, for example, then you can reduce the money that is there by giving more to the other beneficiaries before the trust winds up. So like that, you can, give lesser amount to the beneficiary of whom you don't want to, but you can't change the beneficiaries. You can alter the amounts.
And that distribution before the trust is basically dissolved is then at the discretion of the trustees then?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So the distribution takes place irrespective of whatever the beneficiary definition is only valid at the end of the trust. That means when trust binds up. Till before that, in the intermediate period of trust, the whatever distribution takes place, that is not material to the beneficiary.
So distribution has to be done only to the defined beneficiaries. So if you have mentioned wife and children as beneficiaries, the money has to be used for either of them, but not somebody else. You have to use it for them.
Can vary.
Yes, percentage. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Percentage is not to be followed during the life of trust, but only on the last day. So if it is 50, 25, 25, it's not necessary that, whenever you're distributing anything to the wife, you have to only give 50%. You can give 100% to her or to one of the children. So that percentage is only applicable at the end of the trust, not during the life of the trust.
And I'm sorry, I forgot, but can the trustee also be like a beneficiary or no?
So legally in India, it is permissible for a trustee and a beneficiary to be the same, not a problem. But we generally don't recommend having both the roles together because it creates conflict of interest. And there was one objective which we discussed, which was the ring fencing part, which may not be that relevant in your cases. So that gets diluted, when we are dealing or when that objective is the main one, right? Because one side you have the authority to, the full control of the trust, and the other side you are the beneficiary. So that doesn't go well as far as ring fencing is concerned. So maybe because of that, we generally don't recommend.
So help me understand, during the operation of the trust, which means that it's not the end of the trust yet, right? The distribution can be happening to the beneficiaries, is that correct?
Yes, anytime. The moment you put money in the trust, next day you can distribute the money to the beneficiary.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Or you can use it for their benefit. It's not that you have to give it to their account, in their account. You can use it. So supposing if the family is going on a holiday, the trust can pay for all the hotel booking and everything to the travel agent, and the expenses can be met by the trust.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Then, so the next important point is how to fund the trust. So what are the assets that go in the trust? So as there are two types of assets, financial assets and the real estate properties. So financial assets, in that there are two things. One is that if there is money in the bank account, so say you are transferring money to the settler and the money is there in the settler's bank account, then he can just write a simple check and transfer or deposit it in the trust bank account. So that is just bank to bank transfer that is done. Second is if you have existing investments that you have been investing in India, and if you have existing investments, those investments need to be in a demat account. Then you need to transfer that demat account entire holding to the settler's demat account, and then the settler will transfer it to the trust demat account, right? So that both these things, when they are done, they are there is no tax implication in India because the settler is also a resident Indian and the trust is also a resident Indian. So it is, and it's treated as a gift to the trust. Though there is an individual and an entity, but as far as Indian income tax rules are concerned, whenever any transfer or a gift is done to an irrevocable trust, it's completely tax-free, exempt from tax, right? So financial assets are far more easier to manage and to transfer to the trust. But when you transfer from demat to demat, there could be some minor stamp duty that would be applicable, which would be like on 1 crore 1,500 rupees or so, right? So that could be applicable on demat to demat transfers. Other than financial assets, if you have to transfer property to the trust, so that again can be done. But the issue is that transferring property is a little costly thing because there are two things. One is if an individual transfers property to the trust, the transaction that is done is treated as a gift. But there, as far as stamp duty is concerned, they treat it as a sale. So there is full stamp duty that one has to pay. So depending where you have a property in India, whether it's 5%, 6%, 7%, so that full stamp duty has to be paid. So that is one challenge as far as property is concerned. Another challenge is that, say for some reason you buy a property in a trust by paying the stamp duty or transferring it from your name to the trust name. But after a few years, you decide that I don't need the property, I want to sell it. Then when you're selling it, and if you get capital gains on that property, ideally, if it was in an individual's name, then that person could have set off by buying a new property. But that is not available to a trust. So trust, even if they sell a property and buy another property, the capital gains that they get on the sale of property the tax has to be paid on it. So property wise, trust is not a good vehicle to have properties in it. So therefore, we generally prefer having financial assets in the trust because they are far more easy to manage. Like sitting in US also, you can manage all this in the trust because it's a simple bank account. So it will be online, everything will be online. There will be a debit card, there will be a checkbook, there will be online facilities, net banking and everything. So it's far more easy to manage that way.
Yeah, like instead of just in a property, there's also an option of using bonds and such in India, which is open to the trust, correct?
Trust, yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Then the next point is on the taxation of the trust. Now, as far as, so whenever the settler contributes any money to the trust, that money is not taxable in the hands of the trust because it's not income. It's treated as a gift to the trust from the settler. Then, so as we were taking the example of the 2 crores, so that 2 crores that come to the trust is not taxable because it's treated as a capital or a corpus, right? Now that 2 crores is invested. Say the 2 crores is invested in financial instruments like a mutual fund or something. And whenever that mutual fund is redeemed, the income that gets generated is a capital gains income. And that capital gains income is accrued in the trust. So trust at its entity level will pay taxes. Every financial year, the trust will pay taxes. So that taxation of capital gains income is similar to what an individual pays in India, which is long term. If it is, then it is 10%. If it is short term, it is 15% or so. So that same tax rate applies to the trust also. So as far as capital gains income is concerned, trust taxation is at par. But say sometimes, people have properties which they put it on rent. So that will give them rental income. Or if there is some interest income in the trust, which means bank balance is there, which generates interest income. Or if at all the clients in these days, if they want to have an FD, which gives interest income. So those kind of incomes will be at the maximum marginal rate. So which means that resident Indians have a slab rate benefit. So that is not applicable to a trust. Whatever other than capital gains will be at the maximum marginal rate, 30% plus surcharge and all. So that is how the taxation of the trust goes. Any questions?
Help me understand that. So as an individual, when you have an FD, for example, right? You are taxed at, you're filing your own individual tax in India.
Yes.
On a yearly basis.
Yes.
So how does this track is more beneficial if the trust is investing in FD?
No. So you should invest FDs in your personal name because you will get the slab rate benefit, but trust will not have. So yeah, so it will be directly 30% taxation on FD income.
I understood.
Yeah.
Now, just related question. So you are doing your own tax, as an NRI, you're doing your own tax filing in India with an OCI / PAN card, whatever, right? So that channel will be completely independent of this trust's filing, right?
Yes. This is a separate file. It's like how you file separate tax files for your family members. So we say that trust is also like a family member. You file another tax return for them, for the trust.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Yes.
What is the slab benefit like right now?
Sorry?
In India? What's the slab, like the benefit right now? What is that slab?
Resident Indians? Sorry, the one that I was talking about? So as far as I know, it's 0 to 250 is, I mean, till 250 there is no tax. From 250 to 5 lakhs, it's 10% if I'm not wrong, and 10 to I mean above 10 it is 20, I think. I'm not sure of that, but yeah, I can check that and get back to you on that exact slab rates.
Okay, no, that's a good to know the scale.
Yeah. So the last thing is that supposing if you decide to set up the trust, okay, then what are the steps that are involved? Now, first thing is that we prepare a trust deed for y'all. So if any of y'all decide to set up a trust, the first thing that is done is to set up the trust. Okay. Now, in Anand Rathi, what we do is, along with wealth management, these trust and wills are a part of a holistic approach that we do. So generally, we do not charge our clients for, discussing about this trust or, creating the documents for y'all. So there is no charge as far as the formation of the trust is concerned. The first and the one-time cost that may have to be done is the registration cost of the trust deed when it is finalized. So once we prepare the trust deed, we discuss with you in a couple of meetings and then finalize the trust deed. Now, generally, this trust deed is to be registered. Okay, so registration is something that you have to go and do in the sub-registrar's office in India. Now, the issue is that supposing, say, if y'all are one of the trustees and it is not possible for y'all to come down to India to register the document, because for registration, you need to be physically present. So in that scenario, what we do is we do an unregistered trust. So that is a different process where we just send you the document, you sign it and you send it back to us, and then we notarize this document over here. So for that, you don't need to be physically present. But say when we are dealing with settler and trust, so for registration, settler and trustees need to be present. Okay, so if if 3 people are there in India, all are in India, then we can have the trust registered. But if one of y'all are overseas, then we have an unregistered trust where we just send you the document, and once you sign and send it back, we notarize it, right? So for that, you don't need to be physically present. So that is the first step to do. Once the trust deed is registered, we apply for PAN of the trust, because PAN.
So yes, the unregistered trust cannot be later be made registered when the person comes in India?
So there are 2 ways, sir. One is what I was mentioning is once you notarize the document, then you don't need to register. But there is also a process in India that if you just simply sign the document and within 4 months, if you come to India, then you can register that same document.
Okay.
Right? Because what happens, sir, that once we start the trust and make it functioning and then go and register, then what happens is whenever you register any particular document in India, you have to pay stamp duty on that document depending on the value that you have mentioned in the document. So if the trust is already functioning and there is, say, 2 crores, 5 crores in the trust, then you will have to pay unnecessary higher stamp duty, right? So that is the problem. That's why we either decide on at the start only whether we want to have it notarized or will we be able to come in next 4 months to register or no, right, sir?
Yeah. Okay. Later on, you can explain what is the pros and cons of registered and non-registered, but that not now. Okay.
Okay, sir. Right. So that is so the second thing is the PAN of the trust. So once the trust deed is registered, we apply for PAN of the trust. Once that is received, then we open the bank account of the trust and then the demat account of the trust. Once these 3 things are in place, then you can start transferring your investments in the trust and keep the trust functioning or running. And the last thing, which is the only compliance thing that you have to do, is to file tax returns of the trust every year. And that is the only recurring cost that you may have to bear as far as tax filing is concerned in India, which your CA may charge for an additional return. So that is the only recurring cost. No other reporting requirement, nothing. It's a simple bank account and a demat account operation. So that's all.
Okay, I have a question here, which maybe you can do in separately or through a mail. Because listening to this you must have already come up with some kind of matrix to say what is really of benefit to people of different type. People of certain age, people of certain countries, or certain amounts. If you have made some kind of a matrix to say, okay, in this case, it may be worthwhile, or in this case, not. For example, people have the entire family is in America or Canada. I'm in Canada. So in that case, I may have to find somebody, either in-laws or somebody. But other than that, it may not be much of benefit everybody above 70.
Right.
So those things are things to be talked about. Maybe if you have made a matrix, or you can do in matrix later on, you can share that.
Okay. Okay. All right. Right. Sure. Any other questions?
I have a quick question. If I already have an NRO account and 1 or 2 mutual funds in India, would I be able to transfer it to the trust, or do I have to sell it and go through some other process to put the money?
Yes, sir.
No, that was basically the question. Yeah.
Okay, so you will have to gift it to the settler. So if the settler is some resident Indian that is creating for you, you will have to gift it to the settler, and the settler will put it in the trust. So you don't need to redeem it. If those mutual funds are in a demat account, then you need to just transfer it to the demat account of the settler, and then they will put it in the trust.
No, okay, then it brings another question, which is, this settler cannot be myself as a US citizen. I have to find a relative, qualified relative, to be able to even set up this family trust.
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Oh, really?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I thought earlier you said that it's up to the US laws. India doesn't care. What you're saying is.
So supposing, sir, if you create the trust, what we have seen, because when we've dealt with US clients, what we have seen is, if you create a trust, there is no problem in you creating the trust, but say after creating, you transfer 2 crores in the trust. Now that 2 crores, it generates 10 lakhs of income. Then that 10 lakhs of income will be taxable for you in US also, according to us. So generally, therefore, whoever clients, US clients we've dealt with, they don't prefer being the settlers. They check for them to be the trustees or the beneficiaries, but not the settlers.
Okay. In my case, I have a couple of mutual funds, and I have income generating from that, for which I am now paying Indian tax, and then I'm also paying US tax as part of the global income.
Yes.
And I'm getting the double taxation avoidance and everything. I'm doing all of that. So, and the only reason I want to, let's say I want to create a family trust, is to make the process of moving assets to my kids more easily. Right. So if I don't really care about the fact that I am the settler, and I will pay the taxes gained by the trust will pay tax, and I will pay the tax. Will I get any double taxation credit for the trust payments?
It could be differential, you may have to pay. I'll have to check that. So I'll have to check that, whether will there be any differential because of the DTA.
So actually, I can be the settler also if I choose to, and deal with the consequences.
Yes, yes, yes. Absolutely, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Extending to my earlier message.
Yes, sir.
Is there any minimum amount that you think is worthwhile before you go into a trust? Whether it's 1 crore, 2 crore, 5 crore, whatever. Other than, if it is a smaller amount, it may not be worthwhile going to this. So when you put the matrix, please include that minimum amount as well.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
I have a question. If the US resident, whether it's a citizen or not, if they were to be sending the money to Indian citizen who will then act as a settler, would that count against the lifetime exemption, or between the family members it's not in the between US and India?
So sir, you also have a yearly limit, so it would get deducted from that yearly limit also, depending what is the quantum that you are sending it.
I'm sorry, depending on what?
On the quantum that you are sending to the person. So you have two limits. There's a lifetime limit also, and there's a yearly limit also. If you want to keep your lifetime limit intact, you can use your yearly limits for transferring money.
Okay. And the second question is there a difference between a offshore trust versus onshore trust?
Yes, sir.
In other words, if a US citizen or US resident were to be a settler, would that then become an offshore trust?
Kind of. US would treat it as a US trust.
Okay, so
that's why I was saying the tax implications. Because
and also, are there restrictions in what a trust then can own?
No,
it's okay. Now, whether it's regardless of who the settler is, let's say it's Indian is a settler, what are the restrictions of assets that it can own in terms of real estate, in terms of vacant land, in terms of commercial land, in terms of commercial buildings, agriculture lands? I mean, what are the restrictions?
So apart from agricultural land, the trust can own any kind of asset. Only thing, as I had mentioned about the real estate part, so there is cost attached to a real estate being transferred to the trust. But apart from that, you can, I mean, if that's okay, you can transfer it. So only agricultural land cannot be transferred to the trust. Rest, anything, jewelry, financial assets, money, properties can be transferred to the trust.
Are there different kind of trusts that the agricultural land can be transferred to?
No, agricultural land generally is transferred to or sold to an agriculturist only. So that's the reason why trust being a separate entity, it cannot hold it.
Okay. And same thing with the commercial land and residential land?
That it can hold. It can hold. It's only
just
that
the agriculture.
Yes. You just have to pay the required stamp duty and the cost to it.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, no, I think this was extremely useful, Sonabir. Appreciate your time. You're getting up early in the morning for us.
No problem, sir. No problem.
Yeah, no, I
have one last question, Nari.
Yeah, sure.
Let us say my father is a settler and me is also beneficiary here, US citizen, and my kids now teenagers, citizens, also beneficiary. So whatever the assets I'm putting there through my father as a gift and no tax implications to my father. So, I'm getting old too, and eventually I have to transfer this to my kids. So in this case, I could, the transfer happens without additional tax penalty or registration, whatever that is, right? That's another benefit I could say.
So from tax from you to your father, or father to the trust, or trust to the
my father is doing like I'm beneficiary and my kids also beneficiary, let us say. And I'm also at a point where I'm saying like here onwards, I don't want anymore. I want this to go to my kids.
Yeah. Yes, sir. So what in such situation, what we do is when we say the trust, whenever the trust winds up, we spoke about the percentage that will be given to beneficiaries. So in that, what you do is you give higher percentage to your children. So what happens is that there is also something known as generation skipping tax in US. So similar to that, what you are doing is that you are skipping a generation. So when trust is paying, even if you are a beneficiary, say maybe you get some 10% or 5% or 1%, and the remaining would be divided between the children. So then if the trust has say 10 crores in it, then only 1% out of it will go to you. Remaining 99 will go to your children at the end. So then that can be done. That would be also very useful.
Basically, I mean, I'm not that rich, but all I'm saying is if there is just 11 million limit in as a US citizen for me to transfer to my kids, and this additional money coming,
yes,
I can avoid that. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, sir. So it directly goes to the children, then you don't have to pass it on through you after you.
Yeah.
Correct, sir. That can be done, sir.
And that's the same reason why people set up a trust here in the US, specifically to avoid the 11 million per person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Help me recollect. So you also talked about will. Is will a prerequisite at all, or it can just, the trust can just exist on its own?
So, sir, will is thing that we say is mandatory for all clients or everyone, because if you set up a trust, there is only a portion of your wealth that goes to the trust. But if there are certain assets, like, if you have properties in India, or, certain assets that you're not putting it in the trust, then you need a will for that, for passing on from you to generation. So for that,
the succession plan, you need to have the will.
Yes,
okay.
Required.
Thank you.
So I think Soumitra explained last time, but can you also repeat what are the charges for setting up a trust?
No charges. So no, we don't charge anything for setting up the trust. It's only the registration cost and the income tax filing cost. So both these costs have to be borne not by Anand Rathi, but externally, whoever you deal with for the tax returns or for getting the registration done.
So how much it will be?
So, sir, registration cost basically depends on where the settler and trustees are, in which part of India. So like Mumbai, there is a separate cost for registration, which is around 20,000-25,000. For Bangalore, it is around 14,000-15,000. Delhi, it is 12,000. Pune, it is 4,000, 5,000. So every city has a different cost. So, I mean, when we talk to each one, whoever is going to create, we'll see, and then the cost will be according to that. So it is not a cost that we take, sir. It is the cost, because registration work, we don't outsource it to a lawyer. I mean, sorry, we don't do it here. We outsource it to a lawyer. So that's why, I mean, the payment has to be directly made to that lawyer for doing the registration.
So if I have like a Demat account with some stocks and stuff, and if I want to transfer to the trust, what is the process for that?
So, sir, whoever is setting up a trust for you, first you will have to transfer it to that person. So from your Demat, the holdings will go to his Demat or her Demat, and then from that person's Demat, when we set up the trust, we will open a trust Demat account, and then from his Demat we transfer it to trust Demat. So that way,
but will it be treated as a sale for me?
No. Gift to the. Both ways it is gift, sir. Not to worry.
So in that case, the one we are transferring from me to him, will there be tax implications for him?
Nothing, sir. Because between you and him, both are relatives as per the Indian the relative definition under Indian laws. So therefore, there will not be any tax implication.
And you will show us who are the relatives by definition.
We can send you that, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Let's make a note.